First of all, thank you so much for having me again, Terrain, on your podcast. So my name is Irena, and I am local to Washington, D.C. in United States area, local relationship and dating coach. I am super passionate about, I have a mission, as a matter of fact, to change the statistics on loneliness. I believe that there are too many people too lonely and they're not speaking up about it. There's almost some kind of shame around it. So my goal as a coach to change that and to allow people not only acquire relationship skills that I would teach them, but allow them to make peace with who they are. And that is a starting point to improve who they can become in order for them to start living the life of fulfillment and hopefully find the love of their life.
I remember as a kid, that's all that I wanted in my life, right? Just to fall in love and live happily ever after. But it seems to be so difficult. Even like when I look at my parents and I see that they were in love, I look at my grandparents and I see how their love was kind of similar between the two generations. But these days, it seems to be a little bit different. Would you agree with that? And if so, why do you think that is?
Oh, 100%. It is different. I don't think it's the sense of love that's different. It's the way we express love. And nowadays, love is, I think a lot more people are kind of waking up a little bit to the concept, or actually, I should say, misconception that love is this romantic, beautiful story that we see in the movie, when in reality, love, creating a love story is something that requires work. I think there's a bit of a awakening on that part. But yes, when I think back, well, I didn't really see any expression of love between my parents. Unfortunately, when I was growing up, it was just non-existent. And I think it was just much lower expectations. And at this point, we have with all of the movements and all the changes, beautiful changes in history, much needed changes. But now the expectations are different. However, it's a good thing, but it also possesses certain challenge because now, if we talk about men are somewhat confused about those expectations. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what women expect from them. And this is where coaching comes in.
I was sharing actually, but that you mentioned, I was sharing with one of my friends today, oddly enough. It's like I knew you were coming on my show. And I told
There
her,
you go. Universe works in
I
mysterious.
know, right? It's like, hey, I'm gonna tell her she's on my show and she's kind of similar to you, right? In the way that you speak and the things that you want. And I told her that for me, the sensual part of relationships is so important, like the holding, the kissing, the cuddling, the understanding, like the build up of the emotions between the two people. And then she shared back that there are some times where in her experiences or her observation that people were very selfish in nature. It's like, how much can I extract from this person without replenishing what they're taking from them? And when I look at the dynamic between men and women, it seems to be in my dating experience, because I was a serial dater years and years ago, where you're trying to get as much as possible out of the person without necessarily trying to be as balanced. And that's from the men's perspective. Do you think that maybe for women who are more in tune into their emotions, maybe that's why they're a little bit more ready for the relationship, where the men are kind of left wandering because they probably think, hey, I wasn't necessarily taught how to express myself this way, but I know how to take and maybe manipulate situations to my benefit.
Yes, that's actually a very valid point. I do want to start though by saying that it's not only men who have a tendency, or at least as you have expressed, have a tendency to take more than to give. It goes to both genders, and I can say that there was the phase of my life where I was doing the same thing. It's only now when I were to look back and reflect back and connect the dots, I know that the reason I was so self-centered and selfish, as you said, is because I was not truly I did not know what I possessed inside of me because I grew up with the mindset of scarcity pretty much around everything. So it kind of bled over into my relationship dynamic. I was always scared that I don't have enough. And when that mentality kind of overpowers your whole being, it affects and impacts the connections we are making. So this selfishness or self-centeredness, I think it more comes not from somebody being ill-tempered or a bad person. I don't usually use those words, bad person, bad or good. It's very subjective, but it more comes from the place of certain emotional trauma, certain emotional conditioning we experience in our childhood. So while that was not our fault, however, once there's awareness of this, it is our responsibility to make sure we change this dynamic, we break the cycle, and we go forward in a lot healthier way to approach relationship.
What are some of the ways that maybe we can make those changes? Because as you mentioned, it's not unique to men or women, but you'd mostly deal with men. I mostly deal with women. So how can we overcome that maybe together instead of apart?
Well, the key word, actually, I'm glad you said together. So the key word is truly togetherness. And here we are truly responsible as an individual and then as a collective, as a society for making this change, collectively. Because if we make change individually and collectively, it will be kind of like a ripple effect, like it will go over to a lot of people, a lot of generations, right? But what we can do is, number one is truly accepting the fact that the change needs to be made, meaning that we have to be okay with admitting that maybe we haven't been doing it the healthiest way possible. Maybe there is a better way to do it. So that requires some courage to really sit with yourself and goes like, okay, maybe I am the problem. Okay, maybe I need to stop pointing the fingers and blame somebody else, blame my ex, blame another ex, or whatever it is, or blame the society, or blame the dating apps, and point it inwards and see how you can generate some change from inside out. Because for me personally, I can only now say when I'm 45, I've been through a couple marriages and divorces, and now I have enough courage to say that I was the common denominator in both of those marriages that ended in divorce. I contributed to end of those relationship, but it took me some time to really admit this truth and say it out loud. So this is the step number one, to truly bring this up to the light and saying this like, okay, I need the change, because this is a beautiful starting point. Once you admit it and you don't fight it, then you can actually start implementing change. And number two, reaching out for help. This is one of the biggest mistakes I did when I started my own transformative journey, is thinking that I will do it all by myself. And I was going, I'm not going to tell anybody that I've got issues, and I'm going to do all my work in secret. And then I'm going to be like, ta-da, look at me, I'm all perfect. I'm all fixed. Well, it didn't work that way, because I realized sometime, actually a couple years into my transformative journey, I realized it's just, you can't do it objectively. You just can't. You cannot think your way out of your thoughts. You can't. So step number two is actually reaching out for help, whether it's therapy, whether it's some kind of group meetings, whether it's a friend, whether it's coaching, whether it's just self-education, but absolutely need to get out of your head and get some objective things going for you.
It took me a number of years to understand exactly what you just said in my 20s because I thought that I can do it all by myself. I was very arrogant in my abilities, and I just didn't understand where I was going wrong until I said, "Hey, why don't you just ask where you're going wrong?" And it was such a simple process, but finding the courage, because maybe that's what I was lacking, was to find the courage to say, you know what, Terrain, at what point are you going to say that every single girl that you dated is crazy? one point you're gonna say every girl that you're dating is doesn't know what she wants. Yes, there's some exes that are crazy, and yes, some of them watch this very podcast, and they're probably gonna comment and try to do something to me. But there's some good people that maybe our personalities just didn't match, and I think that's fair because it's easy to say that the guy is a bum, he doesn't know what he wants, the girl is crazy, she's useless, but to your point, what if you look inward and say, hey, what am I contributing to this chaos? Am I picking the wrong person? Am I not setting my boundaries? Am I not communicating effectively? Because I think that's what gets misunderstood or missed is a communication piece. There was a woman I work with, and I'll tell you this, she has such a difficulty communicating what she wanted to her partners. She's in her 50s and she had no idea how to do this. And I just asked a simple question. I was like, isn't what you want and what you feel important? She said, yes. So tell people, I don't like this. I don't like that. For the men, is it hard for them to communicate the pain that maybe they're feeling or the uncertainty or maybe the anxiety because it's an emotional aspect of it and maybe they're a little bit reserved as quote unquote men are taught to be by society?
What I have found is that it is extremely hard for men to typically come forward and say, I'm hurting inside. I have these emotions that I don't know how to process. Half of them don't even admit they have emotions because our society has men believe that as a matter of fact, the only emotion that ever is associated with is anger. And this is unfortunate because men can be sensitive. Men should be able to cry. They should be expressing their sadness or their disappointment or any emotion that comes up. They should be able to express it freely. However, many times they can't and they don't want to. And the reason for that being is maintaining the facade of strength. In many cases, strength, unfortunately, equates to emotionless expression, emotionless being. And that is so detrimental to men's health. And I see this times and times and times again. Men suffer in silence. I have a 13-year-old son. He's about to turn 13, and he happens to be a very emotional, very sensitive little guy. And I look at him and I wonder, like, I think I've done my best as a mother to equip him or continue to equip him with the skills needed to express his emotions in a healthy way. But I also look at him and I think, oh my God, like he will be labeled most likely as so and so, right? He's going to be hearing, oh, man up, suck it up. Men don't cry, boys don't cry. As a matter of fact, I heard it from my own parents telling to my son, what are you doing? What are you crying for? You're 5. Boys don't cry. And I was like, no, no. I'm like, you don't get to tell him that. If he needs to cry, he needs to cry. So, yes, men suffer in silence for the most part. And my personal opinion is that as women, we have a little bit more of representation, a little bit more voice, whether it's social media or elsewhere. So it's a little bit easier for us. And in addition, we women are naturally, we're biologically wired to connect a little bit easier to another woman. So we have friendships. And guess what? Majority of men, they don't even have a best friend. So if you are feeling sad as a man, you don't pick up the phone of your friend and talk it out. We women do it. Men don't do it. However, any emotion that is not processed, it gets lodged in your body. If it's not processed, it doesn't just leave your body. It actually stays there until it accumulates and until it starts actually manifesting in some kind of physical illness. So it is absolutely paramount for men, all men, to learn how to embrace their emotions because this is the strength, not the strong facade This is the strength, the vulnerability, ability to express your emotions. Easier said than done, though.
I agree. I agree. I had to learn that. And it helped me to better understand my relationships. And for you, what are some of the commonalities that you're seeing amongst the men that you assist that when it comes to the relationships that they want, what is a common theme of the type of relationship that the men that you work with want out of a woman?
Well, most men, all men, I would say, they want relationship. The challenge comes in when I, for instance, ask them, okay, you want relationship. This is our basic need. This is our psychological need to have a sense of belonging and sense of love. Okay, but that goes on our basic level. Let's elaborate on what exactly do you envision? So the question I asked, how do you want to feel in your relationship? And this is where it comes kind of as a surprise because most people don't think how they want to feel in the relationship. And typically the answers I get back is, well, I want to feel respect, I want to have trust, and I want to have kindness. I'm like, this is all wonderful, but these are very generic, generalized statements. How do you want to feel in the relationship on daily basis? So we kind of dismantle it, and I help them to truly build up their vision of their relationship so they can actually start working with the tools I'm giving them, implementing the actions that will help them manifest this vision. Because if we do not have the clarity of what we actually want, I don't think we can truly achieve that. So it is, the commonalities are, yes, we all want love, but the truth is we don't always know, or we don't put effort into learning it, what it truly means for us, finding love, having love, being in fulfilling relationship. And this is what needs to be normalized. This is why when we go on a date and people is like, well, I did not have the butterflies, so there was no chemistry, goodbye. I'm like, well, it's not about the butterflies, it's about the compatibility. So if you don't put effort into actually getting to know the person and you're only looking for that spark and butterflies, you are probably dismissing quite a few potential compatible people that you can explore it with.
You also share what the women will look for on these dates from a man with your clients.
Women, just like men, are looking for love. And what I am observing is there is more women that are looking for serious relationship and they're a bit in a rush to get there. So what women would do is they would be attracted to somebody, they feel the chemistry, and in 15 minutes in their mind, they're gonna already plan out a wedding. Meanwhile, the guy on the date is not even close to even think about committed relationships. So this is a mismatch in our approach, but it's natural actually. So this is where being equipped with this knowledge is very helpful. If you go in on a date, and I know the difference between biological wiring of women and men, right? So if you go in and you know that man most likely will tell you he might be kind of looking for something casual because most likely he is afraid to commit. And a commitment for a man is a very big decision because women are wired biologically to settle, and men are wired to explore. You can't go against nature. So there have to be other things in place for a man to decide that, oh, my life is going to be even more exciting and more interesting with her in it. And women, it's just a different approach for women. Women, because they usually want to have kids and want to have family, for them, it's kind of a more of a straight line from the date to the wedding.
There was a time where when I had that thought in mind, there's some things that I desired because you go through, like when you're in between relationships, at least for me, I wanted to still have that contact with with someone else. And there's things that you miss, there's things that you desire, but you don't necessarily want to share it with the quote unquote wrong person, because then you could put yourself in a situation where what are you giving up for that moment of peace, happiness, and intimacy? And there's different levels of intimacy. So I'm not saying to go around and have sex with thousands of people. If that's your thing, that's your thing. But for me, it was a little bit of, how about the connection with someone where you're in a relationship or your relationship is ending? You don't have that in the way that maybe you did it in year one or maybe even year two, but it's still something that you want. It's still something that you desire. Like women and men are so different in their biological wiring, but we all crave the same things, right? Like we all want to be wanted, we all want to be desired, we all want to be held, we all want to be say, you know what, Irena, you look nice today. Like we all want these small things. But there's maybe days, weeks, months we go without ever hearing it. And then we feel alone, even though we're in a marriage. We feel lonely, even though we're in a committed relationship. And then when we finally break free of it, we're trying to think, okay, I know what I don't want, which is in my past, but I'm trying to understand what is it that I do want, and that's my future. And I know from a man, as you mentioned, we explore and then we find, and then women will kind of settle. So, how do we find a balance between the two where at least both parties can get what they ultimately desire?
This is a $1 billion question. I think it is all about compatibility. Remember, I mentioned butterflies and compatibility. So butterflies versus compatibility. This is where approaching finding love and building relationship, forming the genuine connection should be taken in a very intentional, in a very proactive way, instead of looking for some overly romanticized idea that we see in the movies. We need to approach it from the place of how do I make the best decision possible? And the best decision possible comes through gauging, truly evaluating compatibility. And compatibility is not sameness. It's not that you are looking for this for the person with the same likes and dislikes. Compatibility is more of a workability. You have to know, once again, what's your vision on relationship, what is negotiable and what is non-negotiable, because you can absolutely take your differences and complement each other with those differences, and then you can have a very strong bond around your same likes and dislikes and kind of build the togetherness around it. But it's not about looking for somebody who is another version of us, a very similar version of us. It is having very deep conversations, very honest conversations at the initial stage of the relationship, where you get into the depth and substance of how will we do if we do commit to each other. But most people are afraid to ask these questions because they don't want to scare off the connection. They don't want to be perceived a certain way. They don't want to lose a chance. They think that, when in reality, when you are having these honest, deep conversations, when in reality, this is what's needed to ensure that, as you said, that spark is not lost years from now. Because when you get together with the right person and you set the dynamic of open communication from the start, that's how it's going to develop into the future. But at the end of the day, as you mentioned, it's all about the small things. We make a choice every single day what we do in our relationship, and it's those little gestures, those little things we do for each other That's what accumulates into the relationship. This is what the relationship is all about, not some huge gestures. No, it's the small, tiny little things that truly count and that can help to sustain this relationship in the long run. I have created an ebook. I think it's like 20 pages. And I called it How to Know You Have Met the One, Compatibility in Dating. And it's 5 crucial conversations for compatibility. And I break it down into various topics, and it's discussions about trust and commitment. It's discussions about sex and intimacy, money and finances, growth and spirituality, goals and dreams and ambitions. Because the thing is that what trust and commitment is for me does not necessarily mean the same thing for you. This is what compatibility is all about, to truly understanding each other and then taking all of that collected data and making a decision. And from that decision, you make a life story. So instead of looking for a love story that just will be like falling off out of the sky, you actually need to focus on making a life story happen that will turn into a love story if you do it the right way.
Are any of the men that you work with afraid to take that first step towards that path? Because it seems like it could be, in some cases, not a step, but a leap into that direction.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It is all about baby steps. It is, and oftentimes it is baby steps, very, very small steps. It is difficult. It is difficult. And, I sit here today, as I mentioned, 45. I feel I am so much smarter, and I have so much more wisdom nowadays. But hey, I was the one a few years back, 10, 20 years ago. I had no idea how to relationship. I had no communication skills. I actually expected my ex partners to read my mind. They're gonna need to figure out what I'm thinking because I did not communicate it, right? But for men to ask these deep questions, it's difficult because not every woman is willing to answer. This is why everything has to be addressed from the place of togetherness, as we mentioned earlier. Are we in it together? Do we go together against the challenge, or do we go against each other? Big difference.
I could see how that can be scary for a lot of people. You're giving up a piece of yourself, you're being vulnerable, and that's so scary. Like, if I put myself in a situation where I'm going to say that I'm going to open up to you because I want to get to know you, you have the ability to hurt me deeply, or you have the ability to love me deeply. But if I look in my, and I always equate to like dating as like a car, right? You look through the windshield, you're driving straight. You can look to the left to see what's in your blind spots, left and right, and that's like our maybe our triggers or blind spot, right? But every once in a while, you look up and you look at the rearview mirror and you see all the chaos you left behind you, the bad relationships, the toxicity, everything, right? But there's some of us as we drive, we're always looking in the rearview mirror because that's our focus. We're not focused on what's in front of us, which leads us to crash and cause all these other accidents. And that's how I see some people's dating experience because they're like, Terrain, I was married before. He or she took everything from me. Terrain, I was in a long-term relationship. We lived together. They got the house. You hear all these stories. They seem to forget that there was a point in time where there was some goodness in that relationship. How do you help them? How do you help the men that you deal with to remember that as bad as you think it was, doesn't necessarily mean that your future has to be as bad?
This is an excellent point that you have just brought up, and your car analogy is perfect for this. I ask a question, and the question is super simple, but typically I have almost everybody who I have asked this question have a revelation. And the question is, are you running away from something, or are you going towards something? And this is the difference, because very often we don't realize we're trying to escape something unpleasant, stressful we had experienced in our past. And we're so desperate to get away from it that we are completely going in blind into the next connection because we're still looking back, we're running away instead of leaving that behind, but paying attention to what is up front. And it's absolutely crucial. And I found myself as well some time ago realizing that I got out from one marriage, I made adjustments as I thought I learned, to only later realize that I ran away from the problems in my first marriage. I thought I adjusted in my second marriage, but I didn't adjust it to be in the second marriage. I adjusted to avoid what I had, the problems in my first marriage, which consequently caused challenges in my second marriage. So the question is, are you running away from something, or are you going toward something? And once you are able to answer that, this is a deep enough of a revelation for somebody to pause and hopefully start making changes.
How can we identify that we're running away from something instead of running towards something? Let's say, for example, running away from a bad situation, bad behaviors, like you mentioned with the marriage, instead of running towards something that's more positive. How can we identify that?
It would come through in what you think you're looking for. If you were to match up what you're looking for, and if you reflect back, again, all of this, what we are discussing here today, and I think you can agree, it requires a great amount of ability to introspect and self-reflect. You cannot make changes inside of you without having this ability to have introspection, to be able to, as we talked just a few minutes ago, to be able to say, okay, wait a second, maybe it's something within me that I need to change. So let's assume the person is capable of introspection, right? Then you analyze, you take what you think you're looking for, and then you see whether you had it before or you had the opposite, the flip side of it. And it will show you whether you are trying to get to the opposite side of what you experienced that was not good, and now you think it's going to be good or not. There is, I'm sure you've heard about the Gottmans, John and Julie Gottman. They are excellent marriage counselors and psychotherapists. And they say, I just lost my train of thought, but they talk about the fact that the people, I will have to come back to that. I had a great thought, but I've lost my thought. So, but to kind of look back around to the whole idea how to know of whether we are running away or going forward, self-work, shadow work, whatever you call it, but it is turning inside and understanding that we cannot change any external circumstances. We cannot change people around us. However, once we implement some changes inside of us, it's almost a guarantee we're going to start attracting different type of people and breaking the patterns.
I wish you were around in my 20s because you would have helped me find these answers so many years earlier, because it took me, everything you just said, it took me years to figure that out from
Join
a
the club. I
romantic.
wish I was there for my 20s.
Yeah. But I wonder if we knew this in our 20s, how would
Would
have
we
our
listen?
30s? Yeah,
I don't.
that's the argument, right? Like, would we have listened to it?
This is why I always talk about normalization. Okay, normalizing the fact that finding love is a process. Like you have touched on the topic of intimacy. When I ask people about intimacy, many people assume I'm talking about sex. I'm not talking about sex. Intimacy is a deep connection. Intimacy has multiple levels. There is recreational intimacy, there is spiritual intimacy, emotional, sexual intimacy, right? There's multiple levels of multiple categories and multiple levels of intimacy. So if the learning about this intimacy, understanding your own self-intimacy and understanding how interpersonal intimacy is created was normalized, for instance, as a course in high school or at least in the college, then we all would be open to it. But to answer your question, would we listen in our 20s? I can tell you that I would not listen because I thought I knew it all. I was arrogant. I was like, nope, I got it all figured out. So I don't think we would listen though.
I was the same way, and I shared that earlier. I was arrogant in my I would say arrogant to my foolishness, but I don't know if that even goes together. But yeah, it wasn't something I wanted something so bad. And when I realized I wanted it so bad, that's what kind of pushed me in the direction to change. You know, like in my early 20s, even though I was dating people that I was the one settling, or they were settling for me, right? Because I had no idea what I was even doing. I would get a little bit of attention, but it wasn't until like my late 20s where like, okay, Train, you want this, you want the family, you want all this stuff, right? So what are you actually going to do? And I made drastic changes from an educational standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, from a career professional standpoint. And it was like totally a 360 or 180, I should say. But some people, they don't realize it until much, much later in life. And
Well, better later than never.
better
Um,
later than never, but there's no love doesn't have an expiry,
no,
right?
no. I know my oldest client is 73, 72. My youngest client is 24.
72 and trying to find love.
After a very long, loveless marriage, finally starting to realize things. And it's okay. It's okay. It's the journey we choose, right? But who's there to blame? We are the only ones making choices in our lives. As convenient and as tempting as it is to start pointing fingers at our ex-partners or anything else, anybody else, we are responsible. I hear people saying, well, my ex-partner was abusive, my ex-partner was a narcissist, my ex-partner was this and that, but you made a choice to stay in that relationship. And that's your responsibility. I made a choice to stay in my second marriage longer, past the time when I already knew deep down that it's not really going the way I had envisioned it to go. But I kept it quiet because I was scared to leave. I was simply afraid of the unknown. I was afraid what's going to be on the other side. I did not know if I would ever meet again somebody. I was afraid to be alone. So there was a lot of fear around it. And we're all driven by fear quite often, but it is the matter of, do you give the power to the fear or do you accept the fact that you have fear? We all do, and still keep going forward despite of it.
Was it something like when you say that scared, like you had the fear to leave, was it what is outside of the household that may be waiting for you, like the unknown? Or is it just maybe the changes that you're looking to make? Like, what was it specifically that you're fearful of?
It was more of the changes. It was the changes of what ifs were kicking in, and the what ifs that I had were quite negative. I had to do a lot of internal rewiring in my own mind to shift away from hypervigilance and to start approach the world around me in much more positive way. It took definitely a lot of work, but in my case, I was afraid of what if I was 40 when I was leaving my second relationship and I had two kids. What if I will never find another partner? What if my kids are going to start hating me because of the divorce? There was a long list of what ifs, and I'm not the only one having this what ifs. It's extremely, extremely typical. There's no shame around having this what ifs, but it is everybody's responsibility to decide if they want to keep giving the power to this fear, as I said, and this what ifs, or if they want to make a change. Again, easier said than done. Not everybody decides to truly open this Pandora's box. Could be scary, But at the end of the day, we've got only one lifetime, only one chance at it.
Yeah, when I look at the last three relationships I had, and they were spread over a period of maybe, I want to say 8, 9 years. And in between all three, I took very little time for myself, maybe a few months. But the last one, I said that I'm going to take at least a year just because I want to set a parameter. Not necessarily I'm going to be healed in a year, just so can I be without someone for a year? And I worked on myself, and that year turned into almost 2 years, right? Because I still didn't feel that I was ready.
And you, what made you though to like stop and realize like, hey, wait a second, like I need to pause? Because we're so desperate to be in relationship. We're often chasing relationship status versus fulfillment in relationship, that it is hard to admit, like, I don't want to be alone. This is where, to just look back around again to the whole concept of man suffering. And very often when I speak to men, they say, oh, I'm fine alone. I feel fine. I'm busy with work. I have a business. This is all distractions, right? When in reality, it actually impacts our longevity, the health of relationship or being in relationship makes a big difference. But having social life, having friendships, having support system around you is just as critical as having partnership, having a partner. So instead of saying, no, I'm fine single, I enjoy being single, there's no drama, I don't have to come home to any drama or anything like this. And when in reality, if we were to translate that, I am scared to admit that I am lonely, and I'm going to pretend I'm totally okay with being lonely. Nobody should be lonely.
That's something that I had to come to terms with to answer your question. I had to figure out what I'm doing isn't working in the way that I want it to work. So I have to make changes because I'm the one who's picking these people and I'm the one who's picking the situation. So I said, okay, what is the common theme? The common theme is me. So I need to understand what is it that I want and am I communicating that in an effective manner? So that's how I took the time to understand me. And then during that time, I rediscovered a lot of hobbies that maybe I stopped doing, such as
Exactly.
road trips, reading, and things like that. So I go to events now, and I know some people are very like hesitant to go to an event by yourself, but I didn't have that because I overcame that earlier on. So I go to the events by myself. I enjoy my time. I'll make friends in the stands or whatever the case is, and then you go home. So it helped with me because there's a lot of self discovery or self rediscovery, and that's what helped me to answer your question.
Exactly. Self-discovery or self-rediscovery, as you say, and building up, like enhancing your social circle, making an effort to have friends, to make friends, or even nurturing connections that you may have somehow neglected. It's really, really paramount. And going alone to do things, it's important because let's say this is how I always tell my clients, because 90% of people that I coach, we have to work not only on getting dating skills and relationship skills in place to be prepared for relationship, but also building up the social life. This is very typical for men. Man's worth is very often evaluated based on the socioeconomic status. So what men do, they dedicate their time to work, business, professional path, career. And then it's so hard to pull them away from there. I literally have clients who have their own businesses and they're like, oh, I have no time this week to have a session. And I'm like, it's 1 hour. You can find the time. It's like, no, but I have so much to do. Why? Because this is what makes you feel good about yourself. Because stopping something that makes us feel good, where we feel competent, and going somewhere where we may not feel as competent and confident is scary. It is scary. This is once again where it should be normalized to say, I'm feeling sad today. I feel lonely today. I'm going to the event by myself because I don't have anywhere to go with, but I am making an active effort to actually come out and meet people and make the social connections. I host social events here in my local area just so people, those that may not have a social circle that's very active, just so they can come and socialize and start building those friendships, because it's just as important as dating life. Social life, dating life, they both have to interconnect.
So as we close, what final advice do you want to give to the men out there who are searching for love and maybe they don't know where to look, but ultimately you can help them find it?
Absolutely. The biggest advice I would love to give to men who are listening is the fact that it is admirable when you reach out for help. It's a sign of strength to reach out and say, hey, I need help. Help me better myself, become a better version of myself, and find relationship. There is nothing shameful about it. And another thing is, we all have emotions as human beings, and it is absolutely normal to have a full range of emotions and not keep them inside, because suffering silently kills, literally. Suicide rate of men is 4 times higher than women. And there's no reason to suffer in silence. There is help out there. There's plenty of kindness to share for everybody.